So welcome to episode 3 of A Matter of Perspective. I'm your host, Bill Dalpy. As each episode comes out, we're getting a little better and better with things. So just, bear with us as we develop this program. One thing I do need to keep in mind is that not only is this on YouTube, but it's on Spotify and on Apple. So there's an audio component to this as a podcast. So I have to keep that in mind. Last time I changed the phone number and I put it on the screen here like this, but I didn't verbally say what the phone number is. So the phone number, as you can see in here, it's 508-677-7219. And again, that's not a live call-in number now. That's just a number where you can text or call if you want to be on the show. And we are looking for guests continuously. All right, we do have a couple guests lined up for the next few weeks, but it's tough. Like I said, I've talked to a number of people who say, yeah, I really want to share this, but I'm not quite ready. We get that. That's all good. So like I said, every other week, we'll have a guest or every other week, we'll see the frequency, what we decide to do. But for this one, it's going to be Alex. It's going to continue my story as a dad with Alex. And one thing that I discovered in doing this, I created a website for Alex called A Miracle for Alex when this first started. And I was reading through it and I've literally got rid of all my tears already. So I'm not sure I'm going to get emotional on this one. But we did a fair job at documenting this journey. In fact, I got to say, I was pretty impressed with the level of detail that we kept everyone up to date with. So I'm going to read from that. So I'm going to repeat a little bit from the last episode of my episode 1, and we'll just go from there. And again, the only reason why I'm reading my story, because it's my perspective as a dad, and that's pretty valuable. And as I read this, and you hear my perspective, it's very important that I try to get family members on here, particularly my wife and Angela and Billy and everyone else in my family, to get their perspective. Okay, I think it's really valuable, and that's pretty much what this show is all about. So I'm gonna read from this. So this is 0 to 4 months with Alex. Now this one, my wife wrote this part of it. I remember this distinctively. I said, hey, look, I really want to do this website. I really want you to write this part of it. So I'm just going to close out my email so it's not making a noise. So this is 0 to 4 months. Okay. As the days and weeks passed, Alex grew as he should. He hit milestones and everything seemed as normal as it did with my other 2 children and infants. So this is from Beth's perspective. There was absolutely nothing abnormal or out of the ordinary, except that his startle reflex seemed to be more pronounced and more frequent than our other children. Okay, so I mentioned that last episode that I was on. November 14th, 2005 was a day that will forever be etched in our minds. I will no sooner forget that day than I would the birth of our children. This day started as an average as the next, and ended in an event that no parent should ever have to witness. Before I continue, I should add that my husband noticed on this particular night that Alex's startle reflex was stronger and more frequent than it ever was. It was exactly 7 p.m. and all the children were playing and reading books. I decided it was time to get Alex into his jammies. I scooped him up in my arms and went off to his room. I gently laid him down to change him when suddenly his eyes rolled back and upwards and his whole body went stiff and began to shake. The only thing I can think to compare it would be electrocution. I screamed for my husband to call 911 as I frantically grabbed the blanket and ran downstairs to the door, waiting for help to arrive. 5 minutes felt like 30 as we helplessly waited at the door. Shortly before the EMTs arrived, his seizure stopped. He looked at me totally dazed and exhausted. Alex's eyes then shut and his whole body went limp. I was terrified. And in parentheses, she says, not knowing that this was a very common occurrence immediately following a seizure, and it's called a post-ictal period. So anyone familiar with seizures knows that. Yeah, so, we went to Hasbro. We all went, I'll read this. So we had the rescue bring us to Hasbro Children's Hospital, where in the ER, he had yet another seizure. Watching 2 nurses try over and over to get an IV into his tiny veins in Alex's arms. Not to mention a lumbar puncture. I forgot to mention that last time. Can you imagine your 2-month-old getting a lumbar puncture? All the doctors all that they can come up with was us probably, that febrile seizure, right? And we were like totally on board with that. So just to put it in context, this is how old Alex was right here. Sorry for the drool there, but a little monkey. Look at his hair, right? But that was the age of his first seizure. And it's just, yeah. So at 6 months, almost exactly 2 months from his first seizure, so it's 4 months, and now at 6 months, he had another seizure, another call to 911, another trip to Hasbro, another IV event, another lumbar puncture, and being very scared yet again. Again, we're very new to this. At the hospital, it was another long night of watching the clock, watching our baby and his multiple monitors, and before he had another seizure in the AR. So the doctors kept coming and asking, and the same questions over and over and over again. Finally, it came back, yeah, it's epilepsy. We're like, okay, what do we do now? All right. So we found that recommendation, like I said in the last episode, of that local doctor. So I'm just going to read on. I have this categorized as 6 to 8 months. As the date, let me just interject. Well, let me read on. Sorry. Again, this is live. I'm not editing any of this. So as the days passed, we were constantly on alert, wondering if, when or where, he may have yet another seizure. Well, at 8 months old, he had another round of seizures, one at home and one in the hospital. It seemed like a pattern was developing. The only thing that was different this time was the first seizure didn't stop in 5 minutes. This one lasted 45 minutes. The second seizure in the hospital put our little Alex in the trauma area in ER with every, So I'm just going to paraphrase this one. Me and Beth were pushed aside. And in that emergency area room, that trauma area room, literally every doctor and every nurse was in there. And we were literally pushed outside and said, just to wait there. I've never felt, I'll speak for my wife, have never felt so helpless. We just looked in our eyes, tears in our eyes. We held each other, and I prayed. I just prayed. A poor baby boy just lay in the trauma room getting stuck everywhere. Needles, oxygen mask in place, heart and oxygen monitors everywhere. Dilantin and Ativan, right? Anti-seizure meds. And all we could do was stand by and watch and pray. This time we were in the hospital for a week. It was not only the extremely long seizures, but he also had RSV, right, which is a respiratory infection. He was in the PQ for 3 days out of the 6. I slept at his bedside, just from Beth's perspective. Slept at his bedside, updating my husband as often as best I could while he was home caring for other 2 children and wanting to be at the hospital with Alex at the same time. I think I added that in there. They upped his dose of seizure medication, and they periodically gave Alex deep suction treatments, right? So that is an unbelievable thing to witness on your little child. These little capillaries, they send up the nose and in. Oh, it's just horrible, 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 horrible. And as a parent, there's nothing you can do about that. You are just literally just witnessing this stuff. There's no amount of effort you can put in, right? It's just a completely helpless feeling. After Alex was discharged, we took him for another EEG. It was normal. This made no sense to us. With all that had happened, there had to be an answer somewhere, right? The neurologist defined it as generalized epilepsy, with at that time seemed like a reasonable diagnosis. But as parents, we knew we needed to do something more, right? We did. We're like, no, we're not happy with this answer. Pediatrician referred us to a wonderful neurologist at Boston's Children's Hospital, which is Dr. Bourgeois. He was great, French guy, Dr. Bourgeois. We knew right away that we wanted him to be Alex's primary neurologist, right? His team up in Boston. Seizures were still coming despite the added medication. We found that finding a cocktail for Alex's seizure control was not going to be easy. The third med was introduced. This one gave Alex a negative effect, so we took him off it right away. The seizures were still coming and more frequent. Now, Dr. B gave us a prescription for Diastat, which is like an emergency med, so it would decrease the amount of trips we have to go to ER, right? So if we had a seizure, we could just give him that. All this is leading to his diagnosis, but let me go back a little bit. And this was a frequent thing through all of Alex's adolescence. I say he's 16 now, thank the Lord, from under, say 12 and under, maybe 11 and under, being in the hospital all the time. Like that was a frequent thing. In fact, it was so frequent, Beth had a bag packed, but at the beginning, it was really quite difficult. Now, from a dad's perspective, we live in a traditional home where I'm the moneymaker, the breadwinner. And as a dad, you're really torn, right? You have, we're in the ER or life goes on. And I recognized that very, very early on, that it was imperative, because I was the parent at home. Beth was not. Beth, it was just, our SOP, our standing operating procedures. Beth was in the hospital with Al, and I was home to do it, right? To maintain, and it was very important to me to maintain Billy and Angela's kind of normalized life, right? Meaning going to school and, baseball, the whole thing, right? It couldn't disrupt life totally. And as a parent, that rips your heart right out of your throat, especially from a dad's perspective, because my mind was, with Beth and Alex. But yeah, I had to maintain the home. That means laundry. That means meals. Now, my mom and dad were a huge help. Like that was the operating procedure for a while where, okay, Alex has a seizure. Okay, we're going to the hospital. Beth would go in the ambulance. I would gather things that Beth or Alex may need, and I would drop Billy and Alex off at mom and dad's, and then I would go to the hospital. And that was life for a long time. All right, a long time. But as the kids got older and they were involved in more activities, it couldn't be that way. I couldn't expect my parents to shuffle them all around, do scouts and baseball and softball. It's just unrealistic. So I had to stay home more. It meant that Beth was there at the hospital along with Al, and I was here. And from a dad's perspective, like I said, it's very, very difficult to deal with that. Very, very difficult. And this is where I started developing a deep resentment towards my wife. And I told you, this podcast is about being very honest. It'd be very disingenuous for me to sit here and say, oh, everything was great. We handled it with like rock stars. We did. We did handle it like rock stars. We absolutely did. We did what we need to do. Try to remain positive. And that's one thing when you have a child like this, or anyone like this going through this situation, and I've been preaching this for years, is that no amount of self-pity, anger, none of that negative energy does any good. In fact, it does quite the opposite. It brings you down further. So putting that smile on, even if it means faking it, that's okay. All right, because it'll happen. It works wonders when you turn that negative energy into something positive, something constructive. And mine was taking care of the kids, right? Trying to do laundry. I can do laundry, but apparently I don't fold too well. So if we get my wife on here, she'll tell you that. But anyway, and it made life really difficult, right? Really, really difficult. And I felt all kinds of feelings, like resentment towards Beth, like a deep, deep resentment. Now, I felt guilty to even bring that up, right? That's another thing that comes in play here, is that me as a dad was experiencing these, starting to experience these feelings that if I bring that up, I'm going to seem awfully shallow and awfully selfish, right? I mean, that's what, so I had to shut up about it, right? And just carry on like a good soldier. That's not healthy, just FYI, all right? But that's what was happening over and over. And what happens now is Alex becomes the centerpiece of the family, right? And that's okay, right? He's the one that needs the most attention, so that's okay. But at the same time, you know, we got to keep things normal for Billy and Angela. So that was the juggle we played for years and years. But meanwhile, as a dad, I kept it together. I'm not shorting Beth. I'm not shorting the situation. I'm not making it about me, but this is my perspective. I still had to do the sports, do the scouts, do the softball, make a living, right? Thank God that the profession that I chose, I can just do it with a laptop anywhere, all right? And there were many times that, you know, I had to go to the hospital. I just couldn't sit here for a week or 3 days and not see Alex and Beth. So I would bring my laptop there, many wee hours in the morning, tapping on a laptop, you know, getting work done, right? So that was a life for a while. But let's get back to this. This is labeled under 8 to 16 months. The hospital visits were still occurring, just a bit less frequent. We only had the hospital when absolutely necessary, such as an extremely long seizure that did not stop, or because his breathing would stop during the seizure. Yeah, that's a common thing, unfortunately. In these months, we noticed several. So this is when we discovered Alex's triggers, right? As we're getting to know this, which they still pretty much are true today. When he's tired, like really, really tired, when he's overexcited, birthday parties, any type of new thing, when he's concentrating, when he's out of his comfort zone, a temperature change, right? Like really hot, primarily, like out in the summer. Or if he's really concentrating really hard, that can also trigger a seizure. Okay, I'll just read on. One seizure type that has become more prominent at this time has passed. This is myoclonic seizures. I used to call them M-dogs. Myoclonic seizures are these little tics, these little head bobs. And it was really, really, really bad. In fact, we had to get him a hockey helmet. The next episode, I'll throw up a picture of Alex at 2 years old with a hockey helmet on, right? Big, heavy hockey helmet. But that saved him. I mean, he already had stitches and concussions. That saved a lot, right? It was very evident that we needed to protect his head pretty quickly. So I'm just gonna. So I had bought Beth a pitch counter, you know, to count how many myoclonic seizures, and she pegged it out. Like in a day, she maxed it. So that and all those are seizures. All those are seizures. All right. So Dr. Bourgeois had a plethora of blood work done when we were in the hospital in Boston. We did not know then that he already had clinical diagnosis for Alex. He did not inform us this until he had a positive test result back from the lab. He was a very thorough guy, confirming his diagnosis. He phoned us immediately when the results came in. We finally had an answer. It isn't a good one, but it's an answer. He told us on January 9th, 2006, that Alex had tested positive for the SCN1A gene mutation, along with Dr. B's clinical diagnosis, which was Dravet Syndrome. It was a pretty heavy day. I remember it, getting a little emotional, kind of thinking about it. One thing about Beth and I was we're very proactive. More Beth in that realm, we immediately started researching Dravet syndrome. Well, we were be careful what you Google, right? Because we found that, you know, not many Dravet kids live past puberty. And I just remember being numb for a while, like, oh my gosh, you know, oh my gosh. Yeah. So after relentless hours of research, we found that Dravet syndrome usually had a poor outcome, knowing that a baby had a rare disorder. When he was diagnosed, less than 500 cases worldwide. And yeah, yep. Definitely not a comforting thought. Knowing that there was no cure is very distressful, and our best hope for good seizure control and encouraging. So that our best hope is just for good seizure control. With Dravet syndrome, meds do not respond well with it. And it is a cocktail, and you're always experimenting. All right. And that was our first journey from there. And reading about Dravet syndrome is some are nonverbal, you know, some little kids are nonverbal, ataxia, you know, developmental delays. All right. So these are the things that were just plaguing us. So I'm going to stop reading that here. And this is all about the diagnosis of Dravet syndrome. And that kind of kicked the whole thing off. Yeah. So as a dad now, it just put a whole veil over the whole family life, right? Because everything we did had to center around Alex, every single thing. And it should, right? I mean, to a point. But it affected the marriage. And like I said, all these feelings I had kept bottled up. And I buried myself in work. I worked day and night. It's definitely family time. That's one thing about me. People who know me is I get it all done. Like if there's everything to get done, I will get done. And it was very important. Like Sunday's a family day, but Monday through Saturday, you know, I work day and night pretty much. So that was it. So that's the diagnosis. Less than 500 cases worldwide. Didn't look like too many people live past puberty. And talk about changing your perspective on life, right? You appreciate the little things. And, you know, as Alex got older, and one other big thing about Dravet syndrome is the sudden death in infancy, like they die in their sleep, right? Which is one of the biggest cause of death for Dravet kids, even now to this day. And we just had 3 pass away last month, I think. And we'll talk more about that. People we know, close people we know who have had their Dravet kids pass away. And we live with that every day, right? And don't feel bad. I mean, it is what it is, right? There's lots of people who live with things. They have to deal with it, and life goes on. And I made an asserted effort early on that, and this is our motto, right? I came up with our motto is, if Alex is smiling, we're smiling. And what that simple sentence, what that really means is that you take all that negative thoughts and negative energy and turn it into something positive, right? And that's what that really means. And that is a way to do it, even if you got to fake that smile, like I said earlier. So I know I'm rambling a little bit, but it's important that you kind of get fast forwarded and kind of downloaded to, you know, the diagnosis. And there's things that happen in there, like getting Alex's service dog, the ketogenic diet, which, that didn't say that in here. When did that come in? Yeah. So let's talk about, that's at 2 years. Well, yeah, let's get into it. Why not? Let's get this all out now. So the ketogenic diet pretty much changes your cell. Like everyone's heard of ketosis, right? So that's the ketogenic diet is a medical version of like the Atkins diet, right? Let's just, you know, use that as an example. And it was a godsend. Because like I said, those myoclonic seizures, we were maxing out pitch, right? When people pitch, they use the counters, right? Like coaches, I used to use one. We maxed it out. And we're at wit's end. It was causing Alex not to be able to function, these myoclonic seizures, you know, wearing the hockey helmet and just try to think you're trying to do something and you get these tics, and it just was unbearable. And it's unbearable as a parent to watch that, right? To see there's no worse feeling than seeing a child suffer and you can do nothing about it. It's just, yeah. I think back about those days, and I think what helped me through it, I can only speak for me. I won't speak for my wife. But what I can say about me is prayer really helped me through it, for sure. My faith, there's no doubt about that. No doubt about that at all. But the ketogenic diet was a miracle. Alex was in the hospital for, I think, 10 days. It says in here somewhere. I'll just read it. So this is at 2 years. Well, we're admitted to Boston Children's Hospital soon after Alex's second birthday. We began right away by fasting the night before to the next day of admission. Soon after, they began with ketogenic shakes, which basically consisted of a formula as balanced to a ratio consistent with Alex's weight and age. The ratio they started him on was 3.5 to 1. This simply describes that there is 3.5 grams of fat for every 1 gram of protein and carbohydrate. This diet is extremely strict. Beth was trained to measure and weigh everything right to the 10th of a gram, and it's very important. And how to test his ketones. His calories, carbs, fats, proteins, and fluids needed to fall into an exact weight or number. We were in the hospital for 7 days. The beginning was really tough. Alex has shocked the keto team by going into what they call ketosis almost immediately. This was good and bad. Bad because the shock of extremely high ketones is making him acidic. Acidosis is when the acid in the blood becomes very high. This made Alex extremely lethargic, leaving him not wanting to eat or drink. The doctor started him on something called Bicitra. I remember that stuff. Yep. This was to help balance the acid levels. Thank goodness it worked. Now this is another med for him to be on daily. During our hospital stay, we dealt with a few speed bumps. There were several days and nights of vomiting. This is why our stay was 7 days instead of 5. Went home feeling confident that Beth could prepare and weigh meals and snacks properly, and hopefully we would see some improvement. So this was training for Beth too. All right. Because of this new diet medical treatment, we started on a 4-week schedule to Boston's Children for what they call Keto Clinic. There, Alex is weighed, measured, and we go over any questions, issues, etc. They also do a lot of blood work and urine samples to check out all his levels. This is extremely important with the diet because of the different side effects the diet may cause. Besides keeping track of his medical levels, they need to watch his blood acid levels, his kidney and liver functions, and his cholesterol, along with a lot of other varying body functions. The diet has known to cause several different problems if it is not monitored properly, such as long-term effects of high cholesterol and triglycerides, growth retardation due to protein deficiency, vitamin, mineral deficiencies, constipation, kidney stones, elevated uric acid. Sounds like one of those commercials. Impaired immune defenses, metabolic, blah, 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 right? But the good the diet is doing for right now outweighs the bad. And like I said, it was a miracle. He went from hundreds of myoclonic seizures a day to like 2. And all from just diet, right? Isn't that amazing how diet can just affect our bodies, right? I guess we are what we eat. But what it does is it tricks the body into thinking it's starving. And the story for that is it started years and years and years ago. I won't get into that story. Okay, but as good as diet is doing right now outweighs the bad. So far, thank goodness, all Alex has developed is a carnitine deficiency, which is protein, which has forced us to give him yet another med supplement called Carnitor. It is all liquid, right? In the ongoing battle with his low immune system, which has always been an issue, we're, however, able to erase phenobarbital from his medication list of the diet, which was something that was high on our priority list. That is not a drug any human should be on. Anyway, Alex's myoclonic seizures have reduced significantly, at least by 90%. This alone has made all the work of that worthwhile. The only big seizures we have seen have been with illness, right? Whenever Alex gets sick, he's very, very prone to seizures, even now. So the only speed bump we encountered with Alex's immune system, it is fragile. We have tough through a very difficult double ear infection at the end of November. All right, so blah, 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 blah. It's just, I don't want to just go on and on about this. I read this somewhat because we went through the trouble of typing it. So, and a lot of things that I forgot, right? A lot of things I forgot. But yeah, so that's it. I'm gonna, so I kind of expressed to you the struggles I was going through as a dad, with deep, deep, deep resentment to my wife, right? And I know that sounds cruel, it sounds selfish, but like my mother says, and when she was raising us, his feelings are not right or wrong, they just are, right? But I have a habit of keeping things inside, right, down deep and putting a smile on, but and that's what I was doing. All right, that's what I was doing. And the next time I come on, I'll kind of elaborate a little more on strategies dads can use or not use, right? This is the good, the bad, the ugly, right? More good though. Yeah. So that I guess that's about it. Another thing I'll leave you with is we're just coming off Mother's Day. So I'm going to tell you a little Mother's Day story, which a little funny, a little sad. We had to get Treasure, a dog Treasure. I'll get into that sometime, but I'm just going to tell you this story. We had to go to Xenia, Ohio at Four Paws for Ability for about a week. And we had to get Treasure, which was Alex's service dog. This is when he was about 2. And I was on Mother's Day. Alex had huge seizures, just really big seizures. So, I offered to stay back with Alex because it was Mother's Day, and Beth would not have it, which was another start of another issue that Beth and I had, is her always have to be with Alex. Always. Like, even when I wanted to go in the hospital, say, hey, look, why don't you take a break? I'll go in the hospital with Al, because I can work from my laptop, and she wouldn't have it. So that's another thing we'll talk about another time. Very complicated, right? Very, very complicated. So this story, so she stayed behind, Alex was okay, but, I think he was getting a cold or something. I don't really remember the details, but she stayed back. So it was me with the dog with Billy and Angela. So he had rented a van, like a big 10-passenger van. So I'm like, okay, let's do this. No problem, right? We used to rise into the occasion. So I get Treasure in the van. The kids are in the van. I stopped to get a coffee. And the kids had some painting play thing they got from, I don't know, some restaurant, right? It was in the back of the van, like a cup holder. And I was starting to get Treasure out, and a big clap of lightning came. And Treasure went mental inside of the van. And when it's all said and done, I have him on the leash. He comes out of the van. Now, he's a big white golden doodle. Well, he was a big green golden doodle. Whatever dye they had in that cup was green. It was all over Treasure. I'm like, are you kidding me? Here we are, getting trained to be dog handlers and trainers. And now I've just made this dog green, right? How does that reflect on me? So we walk in the door. I had my head down in shame. Kids thought it was funny. And I'm like, well, something happened here. And they said, oh, no problem. Go use our brand new, no one's used it yet, the dog cleaning station, right? So I was the first to use that at Four Paws for Ability. It was pretty funny. Again, you look for the funny moments and things, and that was definitely one of them. And, Beth got a kick out of the story when I got back. But so that's it. That's the continuation of Alex's story and our family story. Now, you are hearing it from one perspective. You are hearing it from my perspective. And I'm very much looking forward to the day that my other family members can come on. So as much as I say that, we felt helpless, not being able to help out, especially that time of the year, that's a memory that's etched in my mind. But how does Billy and Angela feel being at Mama and Pepe's house? How does my mom and dad feel about the thing? How does Beth's mom feel? Right? Like, how does my sister and brother feel about this? Right? So that perspective to me is extremely important. Right? So if you're an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, and you're hearing it from their perspective, you know, what they did and how they coped with it and things they did for us. And that's one thing that my parents did for us, just unconditional love. Like any time with the kids, they would do anything, drop of a hat, right? Not everyone has that, right? We're very blessed and lucky to have that. So, and my brother and sister and, you know, really the whole family. So that's it. That's my story. My next guest, I'm pretty excited about. Whether that's next week or the week after, we'll see. Again, there's no pressure to get this out every week, although I'd like to for sure. So before we wrap up here, I want to let you know we do have a website. It should be out by time you hear this. It's matterofperspective.org. It's just kind of a placeholder. It has links there to Spotify and to the Apple Store. It'll be on other places as we develop and grow this channel. So if you're on YouTube, you know, please subscribe, hit the like button, tell others, you know, if they'd like to come on or have suggestions too. I mean, I'm open to anything here. So the number is 508-677-7219, or you can email me at bdalpy@comcast.net. So do your best to change your perspective, be positive, turn that negative into a positive, take each day one at a time. God bless, and we'll see you in the next one.